This is being called a crisis. The number of child care sites across North Carolina is dropping at an alarming rate, with more than 16 closing over just the last 2 months and more than 100 in the last year. Think about all the families that affects. Many child care providers say they're just hanging on. WRAL's Eric Miller is joining us live outside the Department of Health and Human Services building. Eric, obviously parents are wondering what will happen if their child care center goes away.
Alina, a question that's on the minds of a lot of parents, especially as NCDHHS data shows that decline has still continued as these centers have waited for that stopgap state funding. Child care advocates warning things could only get worse.
There's plenty of things that are hard about motherhood, but for Ashani Gaston, finding childcare has been one of the hardest.
Garbage. It's been horrible.
The Durham mom of two says it's not just the cost,
You're paying close to rent.
but the lack of options.
We need funding so that we can keep childcare.
Data from NCDHHS shows the number of childcare sites in the state has been on the decline for years. It's a trend that's led to major protests at the General Assembly this year, as the industry faced the end of pandemic-era federal funding totaling $300 million a year in North Carolina alone. That money ran out at the end of June. The General Assembly did provide an additional $67.5 million to tide centers over, about 3/4 of what the federal government was spending.
It makes a difference. It definitely gives us a cushion.
Emma Biggs is director of Pathway Preschool Center in Charlotte. She says the 2 months that centers were waiting on those funds were fraught.
Yes, I've been talking to my colleagues, and a lot of us have been struggling, trying to, have we heard when the money's coming down? Do you know when the money's coming down?
Biggs says the state funding has given them time. But with that money set to run out in December, she says the industry is facing yet another cliff that could cost North Carolina families.
We need to be able to bring in qualified staff and to retain the ones that we have.
Now, the General Assembly will be back in session later this year. Governor Cooper has urged lawmakers to take up this issue again when they return. In Raleigh, Eric Miller, WRAL News.